For the last 30 years or so, we've lived in a world that was built on one simple, really powerful idea that everything, everywhere is getting more connected. We call it globalization. But that foundation is starting to show some serious cracks. Today, we're going to dig into what's replacing it, from impossible choices to a world where it feels like every crisis is happening all at once. Think about it. Just a few years ago, this is how world leaders talked about globalization. It wasn't really a choice. It was treated like a force of nature, this unstoppable wave of history. As this quote puts it, a big ocean you just couldn't escape from. And that belief, right there, is what shaped our modern world for decades. And yet, that feeling, that sense of inevitability, it's pretty much vanished. The huge question on everyone's mind today is whether that ocean is actually receding, leaving us all on separate, disconnected shores. What if the world isn't coming together anymore, but is actively pulling apart? That's the core tension we're going to unpack. All right, so to figure out where we're headed, we've got to first be crystal clear about where we've been. For 3 whole decades, globalization was the undisputed engine of the world economy. But what does that word actually mean? Okay, so at its heart, globalization is really all about connection and dependence. It's the idea that what happens in a factory in one country has a direct impact on the price of stuff you buy in another. It's fueled by the movement of literally everything from money and products to data and even people across borders that seem to matter less and less. So what kicked this whole process into overdrive? Well, it was a few key things all coming together at once. Governments started slashing trade barriers. Technology, from those massive container ships to the internet, made moving goods and information cheaper and faster than anyone could have imagined. This powerful combo created what experts call hyper-globalization, this incredibly deep, interconnected web of finance and production that wraps around the entire planet. But here's the catch. It turns out this hyper-connected world had a hidden, fundamental flaw, a kind of impossible choice that was built right into its DNA. And it goes a long way to explaining why the whole system has suddenly become so unstable. This really gets to the heart of the problem. What if it's literally impossible for a country to have deep global economic integration and full control over its own laws and borders, that's national sovereignty, and a government that actually responds to its own people, that's democracy, all at the same time? This is the core idea behind what the economist Dani Rodrik calls the political trilemma. Think of it like a triangle with 3 corners. The deal is, you can stand on any 2 corners you want, but you can never, ever have all 3. Every single nation has to make a choice. So, what are the choices? Well, let's look at option 1. A country can pick deep global integration and keep its national sovereignty. But the price it pays, as you can see, is democracy. This is what's called the golden straitjacket. Basically, to keep global markets happy, governments have to push policies that investors like, even if their own voters hate them. The will of the people has to take a back seat. Okay, on to choice number 2. You could have hyperglobalization and democracy, but to pull that off, you'd have to give up your national sovereignty. This would mean creating some kind of global government or global federalism, where democratic rules are made at the same scale as the global economy. It's a pretty radical idea, and for now, it's basically just a theory. And that brings us to the third choice. A country can decide to prioritize its national sovereignty and its democracy, but to do that, it has to give up on hyperglobalization. This is known as the Bretton Woods Compromise, and it was the model for a lot of the world after World War II. It allows for a more managed, limited version of global trade, one that lets countries put their own domestic needs first. So the pressure from this trilemma, this impossible choice, is forcing this massive reassessment all around the world. For decades, it seemed like a lot of nations were trying to have it all. But now, they're being forced to choose which corner of that triangle they actually want to stand on. And that's leading them to make some very different decisions. Which, of course, brings us right back to our big question. Does all this mean the era of globalization is officially dead? Are we really, truly disconnecting from each other? Well, the answer isn't a simple yes or no. It's more complicated. In fact, analysts have come up with a new term for it, slowbalization. Imagine you're looking at a graph, right? For decades, the line for global trade growth was shooting way up, much faster than the growth of the overall world economy. But since the 2008 financial crisis, that's flipped. Trade is still growing, sure, but it's now expanding more slowly than global GDP. The pace of it all has just slowed way down.
Okay, and this distinction right here is absolutely crucial. We aren't necessarily seeing deglobalization, which would be a full-on reversal, a world just pulling apart. Instead, what a lot of experts are seeing is reglobalization. See, this isn't about ending connections, it's about changing them. The world is basically rewiring itself into new patterns that are more regional, more digital, and way more strategic. You hear terms like friendshoring, where countries focus their trade on nations they see as political allies.
Now, as if that wasn't complicated enough, there's one more, final layer to this whole story. It's this powerful force that's speeding all of these shifts up, making our world feel more volatile and unpredictable than ever. Welcome to the age of the polycrisis. So what on earth is a polycrisis? It's not just that we're dealing with a bunch of crises at the same time. The key is that these crises are all tangled up together. They feed off each other, they interact in totally unexpected ways, and they create a situation where the total danger is way, way greater than just adding up each problem one by one. The historian Adam Tooze, who really helped make this term famous, uses this absolutely brilliant analogy. He says it's like a chaotic, badly sorted breakfast buffet where nothing makes sense together. The combinations of crises we're facing, economic, environmental, geopolitical, they're all clashing in ways that just break our old models for how the world is supposed to work. Let's just walk through a perfect example of how this works in the real world. These aren't separate events. They're like dominoes. First, a pandemic shatters global supply chains. Then, a war in Ukraine creates an energy and food shock. Geopolitical tensions lead to sanctions and trade fights. And all these interlocking shocks smash together to create a global inflation crisis that no single one of them could have caused on its own. And this is exactly why the polycrisis matters so much to our story. It acts as a massive accelerator. It takes those theoretical pressures of the political trilemma and makes them painfully real and incredibly urgent. It forces countries to make those tough choices right now, pushing them to rewire their connections, to reglobalize much faster than they would have otherwise, prioritizing things like national security and resilience over pure economic efficiency. So let's just pull this all together. The old era of hyper-globalization was built on a shaky foundation, one exposed by the political trilemma. In response, the world isn't just cutting ties, it's rewiring them in this process of re-globalization. And this huge shift is being thrown into hyperdrive by the constant pressure of the polycrisis. And probably the biggest thing to take away, our connected world isn't some inevitable force of nature. It's a fragile political creation and one that is being rebuilt right before our very eyes. And all of this leaves us with the critical question for the future. As we rewire our world, are we actually building a global system that's smarter, safer, and better able to handle shocks? Or are we just building a higher walls between new competing teams in what could be a much more dangerous and divided world?